Remasters, remakes, and reboots were something that used to be very anticipated and loved, and now it's just more slop thrown towards the masses. So anyway, why am I even talking about remasters, you ask? Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but in the past 5 years or so, they've become a very popular choice for some IPs. Rather than making something new with their IP, they just decide to remake it, remaster it, or even just port old titles to new platforms. Rockstar. Sorry, sore throat. And the more greedy companies tend to just use these games for quick cash grabs. Now, that in itself is not really problematic. I think it's cool to see some older games be able to shine in the light a little longer, especially the good ones. But then the issues start to kick in when these companies and studios decide to remove old versions of their games from stores such as Steam or even their own launchers, and then keeping the higher priced quote-unquote remaster of their game up. So that way any new players are forced to buy the remaster for a much higher price, and sometimes you have cases where a player has good enough specs to play the old version of the game, but then the remaster is too high quality for their machine to handle. Or it could even be a case where the remaster is terribly made and can barely run on most devices, probably because it wasn't playtested, pretty much like most games nowadays, to be honest. Although it's not like remastering a game and removing the old version is anything new. Have you seen how many times Skyrim has been remastered or ported? At least more than 15 times. And somehow they even got it on an Alexa. I didn't even know that until I did the research for how many times Skyrim has come out. Alexa, play Skyrim.
Welcome back to Skyrim, adventurer. You scroll through your journal menu for a refresher on your quest. Yes. You promised to help the people of the spooky lighthouse by clearing the nearby cave of evil. You were about to decide where to go. There are 3 paths forward, a rope ladder,
It remembers where I left
and
off.
a decaying old door. Which do you choose?
I knew it was on a lot of weird devices, but it just caught me off guard is all. Anyway, now you know that you used this bit of info, let's go over some more valuable information. What exactly is a remaster, a remake, a reboot, and a port? Well, according to this cute little graph I found on this article, it basically shows that a remaster is an improvement on the graphics without changing really anything else within the game. Examples such as The Last of Us Remastered. The graph then goes on to show that a remake is an improvement upon the graphics, but also it maybe change some small or larger aspects of the story, gameplay, or even design of the game overall, such as the UI. One good example I can think of is the Resident Evil remakes, where the game is practically the same as the original with a few small changes such as cleaner UI and some updates to the game design, such as marking breakable objects and points of interest with yellow tape, like they did in Resident Evil 7 and 8. This method is actually pretty effective, like take a look at Mirror's Edge and their use of red to try and direct the player where to go. Moving on to the next type is the reboot. This is basically when a new game has been built from the ground up using an IP as a point of reference. This is pretty much an entirely new game, but changing aspects like story, core gameplay mechanics, and the design overall. Examples such as the 2016 Tomb Raider and Doom games, where they built new gameplay mechanics for a newer generation of consoles. Now on to the last type of game remakes, we could call it, we have ports. This is probably the most simple one out of the list. It's basically just bringing the exact same game to newer devices. So no changes, maybe some very small or minor changes to fix bugs and issues. And a quick example I can think of is the newly announced Red Dead Redemption port, when we were all hoping that Rockstar was going to be making a Red Dead remaster with all the leaks and everything, but nope, we got a port for the Switch and PlayStation 4. Not 5, 4.
Someone, please. Let me do this.
My name's John Marston.
Yes! 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 No! 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 Oh my fucking god! Oh my fucking god! You cannot be serious.
Thanks, Rockstar. I really wanted that. I'm just glad that I still have my copy of Red Dead Redemption Game of the Year edition for the Xbox 360. I don't think I could ever get rid of this. I mean, like, look how shiny it is. Ooh. Ooh. Now that you're versed in remaster lore, we can take a look at the good and the bad. There is no third. Sorry, ugly. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the first game which really picked up the whole remaster hype within the past 5 years was the Crash Bandicoot N-Sane Trilogy game, released June 30th, 2017 as a PlayStation exclusive. But because PlayStation has no games,
there's no games on it! It's a Netflix box! There's nothing!
It was then later released to Steam and other platforms June 29th, 2018. It was a collection of 3 of Crash's classics: the original Crash Bandicoot game, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back, and Crash Bandicoot Time Warped. Is it Time Warped or Warped? This remake got a lot of praise, and rightfully so, staying true to Crash gameplay, but also changing some things to make the experience feel more modern, and they altered the gameplay a bit to make it a little bit easier. But what can you do when you expect literal children to play your game? Sorry, no Dark Souls here. So after the Crash Remaster came out, over the years more and more studios decided to try and copy that idea, and remaster, remake, or port their older games to the next gen of gaming. And to be fair, there was quite a lot of cases where we got some really good remasters, such as the Dead Space remaster, which improved a lot of the gameplay but still kept true to the game, and even had good performance on launch, which is rare nowadays. We also have the Spyro Reignited Trilogy, which is basically what Crash did, but for Spyro. This is actually one of the remakes I put a lot of time into personally and really enjoyed. I 100% the first game, and then I kind of trickled off the rest because I got lazy or I was busy with other work. I've heard from one or two Spyro fans that they don't like the remaster, but to be fair, they just run off nostalgia anyway, so sucks for them. And another great example is the Resident Evil remakes. So far, the remakes from 1 to 4 have all had the same formula, yet all of them have done amazingly and kept the game scary and enjoyable. I'm really hoping if they do 5 and 6, they can somehow make those train wrecks of a game a little bit better. I really can't wait to see Chris Redfield have a one-on-one battle with a boulder in 4K. If you haven't had the chance to play the originals or the remakes of those games, I really do suggest that you take a look at them. I know there's a longer list of great games out there, but if I did that, this video would drag on longer than I wanted to. And I don't even have mid-rolls yet, so subscribe so I can get monetized, by the way. Now, if every studio kept up with that trend of good remasters, this video probably wouldn't even be made. But alas, we do get the occasional terrible port, remaster, remake, etc. Like The Last of Us Part 1 for PC, which had terrible performance and frame drops, but to give it some credit, they did a Cyberpunk and had a full turnaround to fix up those issues, now helping raise its reviews on Steam. Some other examples of bad remakes include Sonic Colors Ultimate. Do I even need to go into the amount of bugs Blind Squirrel had somehow left in that terrible remake? I don't think Sega will be working with them anytime soon on any other remakes. But what about the port for GoldenEye 007 for the Xbox and the Switch? Well, I mean, the game was good. Great even. It was well ported, except it was only available through Xbox and Nintendo's cloud service. You know, the thing where you need really good internet to run games on. Hi, post karma. I sort of forgot to mention in the video while doing my research that the Nintendo Switch version is the one you need cloud gaming for. Plus, you need to pay for the one thing I hate the most in games: monthly subscriptions. So, my bad. Back to the video! Let me tell you a secret, right? At least here in the UK, our internet isn't really that great. Only a lucky few can get good speeds, which really limits who can play cloud games. Now, how about one of my favorite remasters, Overwatch 2? If you don't know about this niche little game that came out in 2016, I'll honestly be a little bit surprised, especially with how much positive reception the game's been getting recently. Just look at those Steam reviews. It's even become the most reviewed game on Steam within the span of 2 days. I'm so glad seeing this game make its way to the top of the Hall of Shame. Now, I'll be completely honest and say I have a little bit of bias towards this game. I personally love this game, its gameplay, the world lore, but the higher-ups in Corpo really ruined the game, creating false promises and misleading the fanbase. Did you know that when they announced Overwatch 2, they said they keep Overwatch 1 going, and you'd be able to crossplay with Overwatch 2 players. Just the Overwatch 2 players would get a graphics overhaul, a couple other things, and access to the PvE. Something us Overwatch players have been waiting for I think around 2 to 3 years, but instead they just decided to delist Overwatch 1 and make Overwatch 2 free to play, essentially making the 2 null and void. But that's a video for another day, or maybe next week, we'll see. One more example, without going too in depth, is the Dark Souls remaster. I haven't actually played it myself yet, but I've been told by a lot of friends that it wasn't really that good, so take that with a grain of salt. So as you're probably aware, everything these days is digital: contactless payment, shopping online, and even owning your games. Well, more like obtaining a license to use the game. I'm sure many of the younger zoomies watching this video don't even know what a game's case is. I bet they were shocked when I showed off my copy of Red Dead earlier on in the video, but anyway, did you know that developers are able to completely revoke your access to a game with a little bit of info and one click of a button? Because if you didn't know this, you don't actually own your digital games. You just own a license to use it. Thankfully, no one has done this yet, but this gives companies the power to completely wipe a game off of a digital store and re-release their quote-unquote remaster onto the same store for an upscaled price. Can you see where this becomes an issue? I've seen people get sad over companies removing old games off the platform and then releasing the remaster, which Yeah, it's pretty sad, but at least people who had brought the game previously still get to play it and keep it. Now, because people are able to keep their games, this also means that any keys that were sold are also still usable after the game has been taken down. And if you saw my previous video about key sites, you'll know that scammers love keys. And anyone who gets their hands on those keys will probably see it as a gold mine. Why? Well, because there are a finite amount of keys for that specific version of the game, which makes the key extremely valuable. Therefore, those scammers will sell those keys for a godly amount of money. For example, we'll take a look at this copy of Deadpool, which is no longer available on Steam as their license for the character or something ran out, so they were no longer allowed to have the game up for sale. It's now being sold for £658.76 on grey market key sites, just because of how rare the keys are for this game. I'm thankfully one of the lucky ones, as my uncle, who got me into PC gaming all those years ago, games shared on Steam with me, and he has a lot of games that were delisted, like for example the GTA Trilogy on Steam. Oh, which by the way is another remaster you should probably avoid.
Hey, get yourself a beer or something. I'll catch up with you.
All in all, I think it's just a shame that these companies and studios get control over what we can and can't play. I'm terrified on how much control they have in the future, so I'm just hoping that enough people within the present can see how these companies are basically wiping games' histories and replacing it with slop. Rockstar, I'm begging you here, please, don't fumble GTA 6. It has the potential to be probably the best game of the decade, but we'll see. So hopefully now you can see that remasters, remakes, and reboots are kind of becoming oversaturated at this point, and there are possible bad outcomes that can happen from it. Anyway, stick around for the outro meme and watch more of my videos so I can become a YouTube drone that gets paid. Bye bye!
Here, I'm gonna need you to fill these up.
With what?